It's April 25, 2013. This is Under the Microscope. I'm Michael Young. Thanking you very much for joining us. Today we're going to be discussing the 2013 national budget. We're going to focus on the way forward while reflecting on the cuts that were made to the budget. As you know, the budget was presented by Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh on April 25. And so far, the opposition, a Partnership for National Unity and Alliance for Change, have inflicted over $31.4 billion in cuts to the budget. Projects that were affected are the Specialty Hospital, the monies for GINA and NCN, the government's Amelia Falls project, GPL, and the Specialty Hospital. With me to add some light and to bring his own perspectives to what would have taken place in the National Assembly is the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Anil Nandlall, who's no stranger to Under the Microscope. Mr. Nandlall, welcome to today's edition of Under the Microscope. You don't seem to be in the best of moods, first of all. Tell me why, and I hope it's not with respect to what would have taken place just yesterday in the National Assembly.
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me to be part of your discussion and for being so observant in recognizing that I'm not in the best of moods. What happened in the National Assembly, where the estimates were considered, and from the estimates the opposition managed to expunge some $31.4 billion, affecting several transformational projects and several other projects that together and singularly are all designed to address serious problems that our country is facing and serious problems that our people are facing, can make one very, very depressed. But that aside, one must look at the 2013 budget in a contextual whole, having regard to what is ongoing globally, because you know there is one global village, and what happens in one part of the world affects what happens in another part of the world. Significantly, Michael, in today's world we are living in a time when there is great economic difficulties facing very powerful nations, very powerful economic players on the world stage. For example, United States, most of Europe, countries like Japan, etc., are all coming out of tremendous economic difficulties, and the rate at which they are coming out is extremely sluggish. So they are experiencing largely negative economic growth. In the world, when these major players are affected that way, there is a spin-off consequences that will affect other parts of the world, the smaller players, that is. For example, in the Caribbean, you find the entire Caribbean has and still is in recession. You look at traditionally strong economies like Barbados. Barbados is now experiencing its worst economic times in some 40 years since independence. Ricky Singh did a whole article quite recently analyzing in great details the terrible economic situation which Barbados is facing. Trinidad and Tobago, perhaps the strongest economy in the region, recorded negative growth again in the year 2012. Jamaica currently is still awaiting green light from the IMF to present their budget. Just recently, they had devaluing their dollar to close to 100 for one US dollars. In the smaller islands, you see countries like St. Vincent, Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, heavily hit with the decline in tourism. So much so that they have been forced to borrow money from international financial institutions to even pay their public servants and public sector wages. And they, of course, are recording negative growth for the last 3 to 4 years. That is the state of the Caribbean economy and the world economy. And it is in that context that one must look at the 2013 budget. A budget that increases salaries, reduces taxation, increases old age pensions, increases expenditure, increases subsidy for vital public utilities like water and electricity. A budget that give various forms of tax concessions to various category of persons. A budget that continues to keep inflation at manageable level, keep interest rates going down, maintaining a stable dollar, and continuing that momentum of economic growth for nearly 7 consecutive rate at an average of somewhere about 4.5%. These are significant developments in an extremely adverse and hostile regional environment and global environment. And in addition to that, the 2013 budget has in it several huge projects of transformational importance to the country as a nation, as well as to the lives of every single Guyanese. That is what 2013 budget presents or presented to this nation. And therefore, when the opposition, using their power in the National Assembly, which incidentally but fundamentally is always supposed to be used to advance the national interest, to advance the welfare of the people of Guyana, they have used that power to chop down several of these projects, and as we go on, we will explain them away. Take, for example, the subsidy to GPL. Now, that subsidy is obviously intended to benefit every single Guyanese because electricity is a major cost to every Guyanese family and to the business sector. It is no magic and it is no mystery that oil prices have been fluctuating over the last 5-6 years. Since 2007, GPL has not increased its tariff, though the price of fuel moved from some $45 a barrel to $160 first, and then dropped back to somewhere about $140 per barrel in the world market. The largest expenditure of GPL is fuel. Naturally, to acquire fuel and acquiring it at that cost will increase the cost of generating electricity. And that cost has to be recovered by GPL, and someone has to pay. The government annually, through the budget, has been able to use money from the Treasury to subsidize the operations of GPL for the singular reason to ensure that this cost, this increase, does not pass on to the ordinary Guyanese, because the government recognizes that electricity rates are high in Guyana. And therefore, if we don't cushion the increase in the expenditure at GPL, then it will eventually have to be passed on to the customer, and hence the reason for the subsidy that was cut. Now, I don't really care what, well, no, it's not that I don't really care, but whatever problems the opposition has with the management of GPL, cutting the government's subsidy cannot be the solution.
Why?
It cannot be the solution because we still have to continue to generate electricity. Cutting the subsidy can only have one consequence.
What is that consequence?
That consequence is that either we have more blackouts, so you reduce the generation of electricity, or secondly, we increase the light bills. That is the only consequence. Cutting the subsidy will not change the management structure or change the management problems at GPL. So it is a bizarre attempt at solving the management or addressing the management issue, because ultimately the people of Guyana will be the beneficiaries of that suffering that increased light bills will bring.
Do you feel the same way, Attorney General, with respect to the specialty hospital? And not that
I feel even stronger about the specialty hospitals for the simple reason that healthcare of a competent type and of a modern nature is a facility that is considered by all civilized nations as a basic human right. The right to life includes the right to healthy living, the life of comfort and leisure. When you look at constitutions around the world and you look at judges who have interpreted what the fundamental right to life means, they expand it to include the right to health care, the right to all modern amenities which are available to human beings everywhere in the world. That is why every single country prioritizes health care in their expenditure.
Okay.
One cannot also discount the fact that many Guyanese have to seek health care of proper quality outside of Guyana. That is an open secret, if one can call it that.
Yes.
Trinidad, the United States, Venezuela, Brazil are all places that Guyanese have gone for special medical care that are not available in Guyana. This hospital was intended to address that void which exists in our country's medical architecture. Healthcare is not something that one can play politics with.
Well, obviously, that did not happen in this case because the monies were cut for whatever reason.
That is the point I am making. It is not that only supporters of the PPP are entitled to health care. So if you cut it, the PPP is unable to deliver to its supporters proper health care. Health care and the subsidies for GPL. Every single Guyanese, in particular, those who need it the most, and they are always in the majority, are the poor people of our country. And they, more than any other, need proper medical attention. Only recently, one politician had to be medevac overseas for medical treatment. So it's not that the opposition are unaware of the importance of medical care to the people of this country, but the political principle to which they subscribe, and I don't know what it is, the political posture which they have assumed, make them oblivious to the importance of health care to the ordinary Guyanese people. Whatever problems they may have had with the way the contract is proceeding can be addressed. Cutting the project down completely, decimating the project, cannot be in any way a sensible strategy to deal with the concerns which you have.
Okay.
But there's another dimension to it as well. Having approved it last year, the hospital project, the government assumed, as they are entitled to do, that this position will be consistent this year, 2013. So, from last year to now, we proceeded to conclude contractual arrangements with the other party to the contract, the Indians in India, and we now are faced with the unfortunate situation that we have a contract that binds us to the construction of this hospital. In fact, I am told that an advance payment has already been made to the contractor, and we cannot discharge our contractual obligations under the contract of doing what is necessary to prepare the grounds for the construction to begin, and of course to pay for the project. So we are now as a country exposed to liability for breach of contract and liquidated damages, because most of these contracts, as you are aware, carry in them sanctions when there is failure by one party to the contract to perform stipulated obligations in the contract. So there is that dimension as well. We move to the other cut, the CGIA expansion program. That is another project which they approved last year in the Parliament. And as a result, we proceeded again to sign a contract. Their problem in this one, they claim, seem to be that they are not informed and they don't have all the information available to them. The contract was, and that is a peripheral, a perpetual rather, complaint that they make, that they are not given the documents. The truth of the matter is, they are given all these documents, but they do not read them. Yeah. I have made that point repeatedly in the Parliament, that every parliamentary sitting, you take away so much documents that are presented in the Parliament by various ministers and distributed to the opposition. I don't know if they just put it in a bag and throw it away, or what they do with it. But their actions after that would lend one to the ineluctable conclusion that they do not read these documents, because they come and they ask questions that they ought not to ask, because the information has been given to them in writing. And that is a repeated tragedy we experience in this country from the opposition. That project now kills the airport expansion that we have. Now, go around the Caribbean and you will see that Barbados just completed an airport. Trinidad, a few years back, built a modern airport, and they are expanding it now. Jamaica built a modern airport. Dominica is building an airport right now. So right across, and these are countries that have economic difficulties, as I outlined at the beginning of the program, yet they are proceeding with airport expansion and renovation type projects. The reason being that this thing here is a stimulus for development. The first impression that one gets when they enter your country is formed at the airport. It is an important attraction for tourism, but more significantly, it allows the Guyanese people to be exposed to more competition in the aviation industry. Yes. And that has the net effect of bringing down the cost of air travel in and out of Guyana. Most of the aircraft industry, aircraft companies with which the government has had discussions, have said to the government frontally that there are serious inadequacies at the current airport that make it difficult for them to come. For example, some have complained about the runway, etc. And other technical deficiencies have been identified. And unless these changes are made, these deficiencies are addressed, these airline companies have said that they will not come.
Okay.
This new project was designed to address those technical deficiencies which exist at the current Cherry Jagan International Airport. And as I said, importantly to the Guyanese public, the message I want to send is that this project would have allowed more aircrafts to come and fly the Guyana route, and that would have resulted in a reduction of your airfares. You have been denied this opportunity for a reduced airfare by the opposition when they rejected it, the project. We have the other difficulty. We have again the legal difficulty here too, because we have again a written contract, and again advance payment has been made, and we now are exposed to a high regime of liquidated damages and ultimately contractual liability when we would be unable to discharge our contractual obligations which devolve under the contract. So again, the Guyanese taxpayer will have their tax dollar being used to pay for the recklessness of the opposition, because we have to pay those companies compensation for the breach of their contracts.
Yes.
And where are we going to get the money from? Not from my bank account or from the president's bank account. It is from the treasury. It is the people's money. So rather than we build an extra road, or we build an extra school, or we build an extra health facility in the country, we now have to take that money and pay some company somewhere in China or in India damages. And they're not small. They are millions and millions of US dollars. So that is what the opposition in these cuts have exposed the people to. In addition to denying the people of the benefits that will flow from these projects, they have exposed them now to increased expenditure and civil liability in terms of breach of contract. The other cuts, the
Amalia Falls. And I want to ask, because the Amalia Falls comes back to what we would have discussed earlier with respect to GPL and making, energy affordable for Guyanese and their access to electricity. Let's discuss a little bit the cuts that were made to the low carbon development project under the Ministry of Finance. And at the same time, while we're addressing that issue, we can easily zoom into the last area where cuts obviously would have been made that would have affected the development of our citizens altogether.
Now, the Amaila Fall project is another project that they have approved last year, and they have refused to approve this year. $19 billion was allocated for the project. Now, you have approved the building of the road.
Yes.
So, what are you building the road to? For what? You have approved the building, millions of dollars you have approved for the purpose of construction and completion of the road. The road going to what? There is nothing at the end of the road unless we put the Amaila Fall project there, because it's road in the middle of nowhere. So it is illogical, and that is what I said. I used the term indecipherable. It is incomprehensible, these cuts. It simply doesn't have rationale. Importantly also, they are telling us that we need to improve the situation at GPL. We need to bring a modern source of electricity. They have recognized GPL has technical difficulties and other difficulties that it is simply too expensive to rectify. In any event, countries all over the world are moving away from reliance on fossil fuel generated electricity to
heavy fuel oil. Or
the alternative type of generation of power, of which hydro ranks very high. Now, for various reasons, environmental reasons, the cost obviously of fuel in the world market, and so that we have recognized that we have to move in this direction. And we recognize, the PNC government recognized it since in the 60s and in the 70s. And they budgeted money to build hydropower in this country before. We are never so close to realizing this dream as we are now with Amaila Falls. This has been recognized by every person who has done an examination of Guyana's economy and what is intended to catalyze Guyana's economy forward to achieve the momentum that it has the potential to achieve. The electricity has been identified as perhaps the most significant factor to kickstart the Guyana economy.
Now, Minister, you're speaking quite passionately with respect to the cuts inflicted by the opposition, and I have several questions for you that I'm, dying to ask you. First of all, it could not be a case in which the government of Guyana did not anticipate that these cuts would have been made. The opposition made it very clear in all of their logics and all of their explanations in the lead up to the budget and before the budget that they were going to cut. So coming closer to the budget and the consideration of the estimates, they made it clear what they were going to cut. Then I find it strange that the government is in a situation where they're unprepared to respond to the cuts, which the opposition said, and the projects which they said they were going to cut.
It is not that we did not hear or we did not recognize an intention of the opposition to cut, but we were hoping that we could have persuaded them
through your arguments,
that we could have excited nationalistic sentiments in them, that we could have brought them to get them to recognize that the political agenda that they are pursuing will not be advanced in any form or fashion if you cut these expenditures which are proposed. That the only result which will flow is an assault on the welfare of the people of our country.
Okay.
That development of Guyana will be the casualty when you cut this budget. And you will not win any political points, either from the perspective of the government or even from civil society. Hence, you have seen the number of organizations which came out firstly in support of the budget, the entire private sector, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, the labor movement, the religious organizations, the Amerindian People Organization, a number of important representative organizations in this country came forth and very emphatically expressed their support for the budget. When these cuts began, the same set of organizations came out and they condemned these cuts. And they issued calls pleading with the opposition to reconsider their positions. But all these calls fell on deaf ears. But to get to the question that you have asked, what is the next step? The government recognizes these cuts to be harmful to our country, to be destructive to the lives of our people, to be anti-development, to be unconstitutional and unlawful. And this government, of which I am part, will do everything that is possible to ensure that those monies that have been excised from the budget are restored.
Okay. Attorney General, you said earlier when you were at Parliament that a move would be made to the courts if necessary to start a fresh case. But I'm told recently that the case that you would have filed, the first, where Chief Justice Ian Chang would have given a preliminary ruling, will be called again in its final stage, where the Chief Justice will listen to the arguments presented by government, the opposition, and the National Assembly with respect to the budget cuts, and we're supposed to have some leeway on that. Could you speak to that issue first of all, and where you are with respect to getting your case in order for the final session, the final hearing, as far as that first case is concerned?
As you are aware, the Chief Justice has already made a ruling. You have read it yourself. Yes. And it says that the National Assembly, rather the opposition in the National Assembly, has no power to reduce the estimates presented by the minister. All manner of interpretation has been placed upon the clear language of the Chief Justice by the 33 opposition members in the Parliament, in a very embarrassing exercise where big men, lawyers, standing up and they are reading the word in the Constitution. When the National Assembly approves the estimate, that is the word of the Constitution, then an appropriation bill shall be laid by the finance minister, capturing essentially what has been approved. So the language is when the National Assembly approves. How can that, not if it approves, but when it approves, how can that imbue the National Assembly with a power to reduce?
The argument
is beyond comprehension.
The argument is that a power to approve is similar to a power to disapprove and similar to a power to reduce.
How can it be?
The Speaker of the National Assembly had said that he believes that the opposition within the standing orders of the Parliament, etc., had the power to disapprove the estimates altogether and to reduce the estimates altogether. He said clearly that the standing orders of the National Assembly allow that to happen, and that the Constitution or the new dispensation did not necessarily contemplate such a situation with a minority government.
The Constitution says very clearly that they have a power of approval. Now they can withhold that power.
Yes.
Of approval.
Power, yes.
That power of approval cannot graduate into a power to reduce. You can either approve or you do not approve.
Yes.
You withhold your approval. When the estimate is presented, you say yes or you say no. That is the power that you have. If the framers of the Constitution wanted you to have a different power, they would have given you a different power, as constitutions have done in other countries. For example, the countries that the Speaker referred to and took his authority from are countries where the Constitution actually says that you have a power to reduce. India says so. The United States says that. Constitution says that. But you check any English language, any English dictionary, approve can never mean reduce.
Yes.
It can never mean reduce. Why is it that they don't have why is it that they are saying that approve means reduce, but it doesn't mean increase? And why is it, rather than reduce the budget, they are not increasing the budget? How it is that they accept that they have a power to reduce, but they don't have a power to increase? And if you have a power to amend, then you have a power, amendment will include a reduction of a figure or an increase of that figure.
Yes.
So you see the fallacy of the argument?
I understand.
How it is that they are accepting that they don't have a power to increase, but they have a power to amend, but that power to amend is limited to decreasing. It's all foolishness. But anyway, the Chief Justice has ruled, and that is the proper authority under our constitutional structure. The courts is the only guardian and the only arbiter, only guardian of the Constitution and the only interpreter of the Constitution. and is the final arbiter on all matters of law.
How
The Speaker can rule a million times,
But he said that the
but he
Parliament
cannot
had-
overrule the court.
He says the Parliament has no supervisory control or no supervisory
I heard what he
powers
said. I
over
heard what
the
he
Assembly.
said, and he's not right.
Okay.
Courts have, this is not a vexed issue.
I understand.
It is an issue that has been settled time and time again by courts interpreting constitutions that are similar to ours. Parliament has certain sovereignty, it has certain independence in the way that it functions. But once it collides with the Constitution, then the court steps in. There is no authority in this land that can act without review by the court. None. None is above the law. The executive president is the most powerful institution in this land. And the president is, his actions are reviewable by the courts. You see the radio license matter?
Yes.
Isn't that the exercise of presidential power?
Yes.
And yet you see the courts are being asked to review. So the point I am making is that no one or no institution is beyond the jurisdiction of the court. All right? We are all subject to a legal system. And that legal system, the court plays that central role of regulating the conduct of all, from private individuals to limited liability companies to statutory bodies to constitutional organs. All are subject to the supervisory jurisdiction of the court in one way or another. Parliament is not exempt in this equation. So that argument it can be serious. It's an argument that is really should not be really advanced anywhere. So we have to go back to the court. One of the other very puerile arguments which they have advanced is that the Chief Justice gave a preliminary ruling and therefore it is not enforceable. I mean, I have said over and over again that courts every day issues injunctions, conservatory orders, order nisi. They are all preliminary orders because the case is still going on.
Yes.
But no one can seriously walk around and say that they're not going to be bound by these orders. You know, and these are lawyers who are saying this. That is why I find it very, very
I
embarrassing.
think it's malicious then, because they ought to obviously have the same legal knowledge that you would have acquired.
What I
through the
know,
same
what I
means.
know when they advance arguments like that, they are hurting their profession and they're doing great damage to their professional standing. But that aside, the Chief Justice has issued notices that informing all the parties that this budget cut case of 2012 will be fixed for resumption on the
May 8th.
May the 8th
Yes.
at 1:30, and all parties are asked to attend the court. Hopefully, I can persuade the Chief Justice to make some comments, actually, on the Speaker's ruling. I'm sure that those comments are going to be quite interesting. And the Chief Justice will get an opportunity, if he thinks that it is appropriate for him to do so, to express his own views in the form of a final judgment this time, and it will be final this time, on what has transpired in the Parliament. Though it is a 2012 case, I will invite him to consider what has transpired in Parliament and to remark on them. But significantly, I may have to approach the court afresh to deal with the Speaker's ruling that has just been handed down, because you know, that is a separate thing. That was what is before the court was the 2012 budget.
Yes.
So we may have to do. I may have to approach the court to deal with this last ruling and to formally have the court express a view on it and issue such orders that the court may deem appropriate in the circumstances.
And which could not obviously be different from its ruling in the 2012 EC.
I find it extremely difficult to believe that any court that has that had issued a preliminary ruling on matters of law, will issue a different ruling at the final stage of the matter. Because the truth is that the Constitution has not changed from 2012 when the Chief Justice interpreted to now. So it is the same process that he will go through. And from all indications and from the position of judicial logic, he ought not to depart from the pronouncements which he made in the preliminary form of his ruling. So I hope that when that final ruling is given, it will bring some degree of closure on this matter. I have no doubt that persons may wish to appeal, and we encourage that because the system allows for that, and that is an important part of the justice system and is important for our democracy. I would like the final court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, to rule on this matter, because I feel very strongly that an organization in a constitutional structure like ours will arrogate unto itself a belief that it is above the law, above the Constitution, and above review by the courts. That is authoritarianism. So I feel very strongly as a lawyer and obviously as Attorney General on these issues. So hopefully the judge will rule quickly, and at least one part of the matter will come to an end. And if persons who may be aggrieved by that ruling obviously would be free to appeal that ruling and take it all the way to the zenith of our judicial structure, that is the Caribbean Court of Justice.
What do we do in the meantime? Because there's a large amount of uncertainty looming in our society once again, and it seems as though deja vu is taking place. Because in 2012, this exact environment prevailed, but now stakeholders are speaking out. Guyanese are uncertain with respect to their jobs, uncertain at NCN and GINA with respect to the modus operandi under which they're going to operate. And we see several other projects like Amalia Falls, which would have created jobs, the CGIA project, which would have created jobs in this specialty hospital.
That is another dimension.
What does government do, Attorney General, in the meantime while you are approaching the court? Obviously not just sit idly by.
That is another dimension that I forgot to mention when I assessed the impacts of these projects to Guyana. These projects collectively would have employed thousands and thousands of Guyanese who are now being denied this employment. Not to mention the income that would have flowed indirectly. The man who sells sand, the hardware store that sells cement, and I can go on and explain the spin-off of these major projects. But as I indicated to you, the government will not sit idly by and allow the people of this country to perish. The People's Progressive Party has a long history of struggle and of standing on the side of the Guyanese people and leading them out of one problem after another. The People's Progressive Party was formed in 1950. And if you look at our history, you will see at every stage of this country's history, from colonialism to now, every major hurdle that the people of this country faced, the PPP was in the forefront of leading our people out of from one tragedy after another. From colonialism to independence. After independence, we had to deal with the tyranny of the PNC, the dictatorship of the PNC, and we stood by the people and we walked with them and we led them through that to a period of democracy. Now we have a tyranny in the parliament. We have dictatorship in the parliament, dictatorship of one, and that is where we will not abandon our people again. We will again lead our people out of this morass. So legally, we are going to the courts as one way, and we will, as a collective, sit down and work out the various methods.
I'm not asking you, obviously, to speak on behalf of President Donald Ramatar, but from your previous cabinet meetings and so, explain to us the state of mind of the president, some of the things that he's considering, and whether or not he will assent to the appropriation bill, because I think that is one of the issues that has been, dominating the halls of debate. Will President Ramatar ink the bill that was approved for over $170 billion as opposed to...
While I don't wish to preempt the president on these matters, the president will speak to the press shortly. And I can tell you that most naturally he is devastated, like every member of government, in relation to these budget cuts. The appropriation bill, I can see no reason for the president not assenting to the bill, because we have to go with what we have and then see how we can get what we have been denied. But as a beginning, we should go with what we have. So I don't anticipate the president not assenting to the appropriation bill. We still have a lot of money and we still have a lot of work to do. We just can't shut the country down. Unlike the irresponsibility that has been displayed by the opposition, the pure callousness that has been displayed by the opposition, and the disregard for the people's interest and the people's welfare. We can't. We have to lead this country. We are the government. We are the mature political organization in this land, and we have to behave that way. And we have to behave responsibly and take the reins of government and lead the people out of this tragedy that we find ourselves in. As Minister Ashni Singh was explaining to the opposition that the private sector had made a specific call to the opposition that they desist from cutting the Cheddi Jagan International Airport. You know what the opposition said very clearly in the parliament? They said, well, the private sector commission is not here. They don't have to vote. We have to vote. So that is the type of befuddling arrogance that you are confronted with. And obviously that they attempted to pass a motion to cut that CJIA expansion program, the airport expansion program, but both Ramjatan and Carl Greenwich were attempting to cut a higher sum than was actually allocated. And the Speaker ruled that it was improper for them to do so and struck out both of their motions. The alternative was either to withdraw completely and say that you're supporting the entire head, of which the airport is only one, or to withhold your support from the entire head. And, they withhold their support from the entire head. So that not only did they, by so doing, strike down the expansion of the airport at Timeri, but included in that head was monies to conclude the expansion taking place at Ogle. So that has been knocked out. We have some 48 airstrips in the interior. Now, the major way of traveling to the hinterland of Guyana is by air. I mean, we are doing well now. People are doing well, and they are able to travel more frequently. Hence, we had to expand the Ogle facility. You have a thriving mining industry that is booming. You have manganese, that when I said mining industry, I meant gold.
Yes.
You have manganese operations that are going on at Region 1. You have the entire Amerindian community resident in the hinterland regions. they need repairs to be done to these
Which obviously will not
airstrips.
be done at
And
least not now.
all these monies for 48 hinterland airstrips were under the same head. They cut that out.
Attorney General, you said
No,
that
let me complete that.
Okay.
And there is also some equipment which had to be purchased by Civil Aviation Authority to ensure the safety of air travel at Timeri, at Chedijagan International Airport. Equipment for the control tower, for example, that also has been cut out. So they have really made air travel and passengers who are using that mode of transportation are now being exposed to danger because they would have inadequate airstrips now and they don't have the necessary equipment to guide aircraft to land at Timeri. So these cuts are destructive from every conceivable interest, from every conceivable perspective. Let me just conclude by saying this. Their major platform has been that they need information. As I said, we have given them all the information. I don't know what else they need because they're not saying what they need because they have everything already. We were in that parliament for nearly a month, nearly over 2 weeks of which were spent simply answering questions from 2 o'clock every day to sometimes till 12 midnight. Thousands and thousands of questions were asked and all answered. From the beginning of the 2011, the 10th Parliament, over 200 questions were asked of several ministers. All were answered and documents were provided. So there are several avenues that are available to extract from the government information that you may need. This government has always been very frank and very liberal with disclosures of information of a public nature. So that cannot be an argument that one can sensibly advance.
Okay. As we come, Minister, to the end of our program, the Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, Housing and Water started off the debate here finale by saying that there was a Guyanese dream, which the government of Guyana was pursuing. That dream was changed into the El Dorado by the Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment, Robert Resort. And then we heard, government selling this idea of a developing Guyana, a Guyana where persons will have equitable access to opportunities. Under all of these projects that you spoke about, where are we with respect to the Guyana dream? If you were to say so, are we still dreaming about having that dream?
The Guyana dream is alive.
Still.
It is alive, and this government will do everything within its powers to ensure that that dream becomes a reality for every single Guyanese. The government will do so in recognition of an opposition that is prepared to do everything that it possibly can do to ensure that this dream is not made a reality. So we accept that there is an opposition that is prepared, willing, and continues to relentlessly act against the welfare of the Guyanese people and against national development. We have to accept that as a reality. That is a cross that every Guyanese will have to bear. But we have to take the country forward. It will be a little difficult, little more difficult, if the opposition was to come on board on this dream to make Guyana the place that we would all want Guyana to be. Then, we welcome them with open arms. Unfortunately, they seem not to be so inclined. But we will not hold back progress stymie development because there is a recalcitrant and obstructionist opposition.
Okay. Attorney General, I'll see you in court along with all of the other journalists and the entire public that will be following this matter closely with respect to the budget cuts. And we do hope that all of the issues surrounding the budget is resolved in good time so that we can have normalcy restored to, life in Guyana. This has been Under the Microscope. You were listening to Attorney General Anil Nandlall, and we were discussing issues with respect to the 2030 national budget. I'm Michael Young, thanking you very much for joining us and encouraging you to do join us again. Goodbye.